I'm going to give you a history of the music in the Antiochian Archdiocese of North America. Our roots really started, the early roots, in 1905, right when Raphael Hallowini first came here. And at that time, in our cathedral in Brooklyn, the first cathedral, which you see here on the screen, St. Nicholas, Isabel Hapgood, who was very active in the YMCA of the day, and she was an Anglican Episcopalian. She took a great interest in the Russian Church, in the Orthodox Church. She's the one that sat down and wrote out the entire services of the Orthodox Church in English and published a book that was sponsored by the YMCA. This is the copy of the first book, and I don't know if can you read those words up there? Okay, I'm going to let's see, point to it. During the course of our 109 years, the text of the liturgy has changed. We've added words, we've deleted words. Let me show you some examples. In this early edition, now this is before World War I, we have in here the petitions for the, let's see, Tsar. Here we go. Furthermore, we pray for the blessed and ever memorable, most holy patriarchs, etc., etc., etc. I don't know. Can you read in there? Right. So that was there. But more interesting, so that obviously was dropped, and we substituted in this country the President of the United States. Now look over here to the, here we go. Look over here to the cherubim. That we may receive on high, the King of all, like conqueror on shields and spears, by the angelic host invisibly upborne. What does that mean? We were singing that at the beginning of the 20th century. Well, it turns out that in the Roman legion days, the conqueror, the general who fought the war and was the hero, came home and was placed on the top of these shields and spears and carried in a parade as a conquering hero. So the hero rode upon shields and spears. And when Justinian composed the cherubim, he was likening Christ as the conqueror, okay, who rode upon shields and spears invisibly carried by the angels, not carried by the Roman legion. Okay. So we dropped the phrase shield and spears somewhere there early in the 20th century. But that's what it refers to. And it was no mean feat trying to find a picture of the Roman shields and spears. Okay. So we had this wonderful text that Isabel Hapgood had written, and she used the Book of Common Prayer, the Anglican Book of Common Prayer, which along with the King James Bible is considered among the greatest of English literature. That's why our so-called Old English text is poetic and so beautiful, and why it's lasted this long. It'll probably eventually change, but that's the basis of it. We had a very good basis in our English translation. After World War I, Metropolitan Germanius came from Syria to visit this country, to solicit funds and take back to the old country. And then he eventually stayed here. But in 1920, he published this little book, which is probably the first book published by our church in this country. In this case, he published it. And he put the music, the Byzantine chant, for the entire liturgy in this book. And he called it the Paradise. And here you have the Lord Have Mercies, the Great Ectenia litany. And he wrote it for organ. So he put the 4 parts in it. Now, the 4 parts were really for the organ, but hey, what was he doing? He was adopting Western tradition of the four-part. So this is our first hint of four-part. And I'm going to have the choir sing you this great litany. And remember that it came from the Greek. And if you know anything about the Great Litany, one of the traditional litanies, you start Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie, you go up the scale and you come back down. This is it in English by Metropolitan Germanius in 1920. Thank you. That was 1920. In 1926, the Archdeacon Emmanuel Abu Hatab had become the Metropolitan. And let's see, that's Emmanuel Abu Hatab standing with St. Raphael seated. And he also wrote in English, and we have his original manuscript. It's here in the archives of the library, and unfortunately, I could not dig it out to tell you what it was, but his grandniece had donated the manuscript to the library. So we have it, and I want to say it was the Cherubim that he wrote in English. So that's the second example of early manuscripts and writing in the Archdiocese by Emmanuel Abu Hatab. In 1936, Archbishop Anthony Bashir asked one of the recent converts, Michael Gelsinger, who was a professor of Greek at Buffalo University. He asked him if he would put together a booklet of Orthodox music in four-part harmony. So our four-part harmony in our choral work goes clear back to the early Russian influence of the church. It manifested itself in the organ parts of Metropolitan Germanius and Abu Hatab. And now here's the Metropolitan Bashir asking for an actual book to be published. And that's your, let's see, blue book that was given out. There, I think there's still a few copies. And what Michael Gelsinger did, he took a selection of Slavonic pieces and Byzantine pieces and put them in harmony. Some of the melodies were Sakellarides, which Gelsinger harmonized himself. He did not use Sakellarides harmonies. And the Slavonic pieces also, he either harmonized himself or translated the ones in the Russians and adapted them. He later became a priest of the Archdiocese, and his son became a choir director in Buffalo and formed the first children's choir of the Archdiocese way back then in our church, St. George in Buffalo. In his book, in this blue book, he has a section on a glossary defining what the musical terms are, what an Indiomelon, what a Troparian, a Kontakian are. He tells you how to pronounce the transliterated Greek. It's really quite a nice little book for being published way back in 1989. From this book, we still sing, "It is truly meet," the Bortniansky, "It is truly meet." We sing Staroruski's "Only Begotten Son." So some of these have been with us 75 years. That was 1939. The 1940s, after the war especially, we formed SOYO, and SOYO, Syrian Orthodox Youth Organization, sort of had committees, and one of the committees was music, and they basically were the precursor of the Department of Sacred Music. They ran the music of the Archdiocese. They issued music for the conventions and sort of coordinated all the music. That went from the 1940s, and by 1950, Anthony Bashir, the Metropolitan, asked Professor Michael Hilco, who was the choir director in Perth Amboy, New Jersey for a Carpathian church. He asked him to write a book with the Arabic liturgies in 4-part and with an English liturgy in 4 parts. So Michael Hilco took simple Kievan Russian tones and wrote an English liturgy. We still sing from that liturgy, we have seen the true light, and let our mouths be filled with, okay. So that liturgy is in here, but he sat down 2 priests, Michael Simon and Joachim Dalek. Michael Simon was from Paterson, New Jersey, later Englewood, and Joachim Dalek was in Brooklyn. He sat down with them, and they sang to him the entire Divine Liturgy in Arabic, and he wrote down the melody and then harmonized it. Those 2 liturgies in transliterated Arabic are in this book. And a number of years ago, I did go through those 2 liturgies and sort of combined them into one, put it into English, and it is in the on the website. Let me backtrack. In the blue book, I forgot, the choir is going to sing you a selection of Michael Gelsinger. It's a Greek Exapostolarion for Christmas. So let's go back to that. That was tone 3. Believe it or not, that was tone 3. And when you harmonize it the way he did, it sounds like a Christmas carol. It's a wonderful piece. And you can pray to it. And as I give you these illustrations, keep that in mind, that even though they were incorporating American traditions, Western culture into our music, it was still prayerful. You could still pray to it. Okay, now going on to Hilco, he did two things. He did this book with the Arabic liturgy, so we're going to sing the next selection. It's the Holy, Holy, Holy from his anaphora, and it's the Arabic melody that he heard from the 2 priests, which he harmonized. Oh, did I skip that? Okay. Okay, I'll catch him after Hilco. Thank you. And what Michael Hilko also did, he took a huge body of Russian pieces and Carpathian pieces and translated them into English. And this next selection, By the Rivers of Babylon, will give you a feel for how well he adapted into English the Slavonic melodies. I've seen later adaptations, and they are nowhere near as powerful as his. By the Rivers. We had a priest of the Archdiocese, Father David Abramtstov, who represents one of many of our composers who are not well known. Father Abramtstov was the priest in Bridgeville, Pennsylvania, St. George, in the 1950s. He was of Carpathian, actually Galician background, and he wrote music, much of it Carpathian and Galician, but also Arabic. He has a beautiful memory eternal to the Arabic melody. And what he did was also incorporate American culture. He wrote a Christmas liturgy. And I want you to listen very carefully to this second antiphon verse with its refrain, O Son of God, born of a virgin. And see if you can detect what he incorporated into this. I think you have to back up a little bit. Okay.
Blessed is the man who feareth the Lord, who greatly delights in his commandments. O Son of God,
catch the two melodies he inserted? Just 4 notes on one and 5 notes from another. Do you recognize it? The first Noel, O Son of God, and the Alleluia from Angels We Have Heard on High. Glory.
C bar 15 once again.
O Son of God, who was born of a virgin, save us who sing unto thee. Alleluia.
This was back in 1950, people. Okay. In the early 50s, also during the decade of the 50s, Metropolitan Bashir asked Father James Mina, who was a musician, especially in the Byzantine mode, if he would put together a book of a 4-part harmony, the resurrectional 8 tones, and the cantakia, and certain selected cantakia. And he did. He put together this book, Hymns of Praise, and he harmonized the 8 tones. And he also put together the Divine Liturgy later in that decade of Tchaikovsky's work. So it's, I think, the only version of Tchaikovsky in English that I'm aware of his Divine Liturgy. But Father Mina was also very proficient, and he set to music many of the Russian tones for Vespers and Matins. And one of his most beautiful pieces was the tone 1, O Lord, to thee have I cried, Psalm 141, which he put into 4-part harmony. And that was sort of a classic of our archdiocese in the 50s, 60s, and 70s until Kazan wrote the Kazan Project, and we started singing, O Lord, to thee have I cried, in all 8 tones. At that point, some churches continued to sing Father Mina's 4-part tone 1 for every day. I mean, every time they had a tone, they didn't change the tone, but eventually it died out. But it's a beautiful piece, and I want you to hear it. The choir will sing that one. Okay, now we're going through the 50s. We're still into choral music. The Byzantine melodies had not been extensively written down in English yet. And in the early 60s, Ray George was asked by Metropolitan Bashir to put some booklets together for Great Friday and for the Resurrectional Service. So Ray compiled these books using music from various sources, and where he didn't find it, Ray composed. And one of the pieces he composed, and it's in your book, we're not going to sing it, is Pious Joseph. And that melody is basically a Byzantine tone harmonized in the version of a Greek village, a rural Greek village. It's a melody and harmony, rather, that you don't often hear in Greek churches or anywhere else, but it's a very lovely melodic melody, and many of you probably use it if you use the Great Friday book. Metropolitan Bashir, who's very musically oriented, then asked the archpriest, Archimandrite rather, Gregory Aboud at the cathedral if he would put together the services for the wedding and Vespers and the liturgy. So Archimandrite Aboud sort of clipped music from various sources. At this point, Anthony Bashir was concerned that we wanted to keep our Byzantine tradition too. So this music that Archimandrite Aboud put together was all Byzantine, although some of it was harmonized. And he, you could tell from the page on the right that he cut and pasted, and photocopy machines, early ones, were just coming along there. And that book came out. Actually, 3 or 4 booklets came out at that time. Okay. 1968, Soya had successfully completed its task of keeping the archdiocesan music together and distributing it and all. And we were starting to really grow. And by 1968, Metropolitan Philip had become the archbishop, and he set about organizing the archdiocese into departments. And that he appointed Father Mina as the first chairman of the Department of Sacred Music in 1969. And Father Mina sat down and decided that we needed a standard liturgy. Sound familiar? And so he put together this booklet, The Divine Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, and he labeled it Standard Number 1, which tells you he had intentions of coming out with number 2, 3, or 4. Only number 1 came out, and it was music that we still sing a lot of it today. The cherubim in this booklet, Father Mina wrote, and it was very, very difficult, and to my knowledge, it really was never sung widely in the archdiocese. But we were publishing Byzantine and non-Byzantine music. This book has both Byzantine and non-Byzantine 4-part harmony in it. And the hierarchical Trisagion first appeared in this booklet, as well as many years for the bishop. And he used a variation of tones 1, 2, 5, and 8 throughout this book. Father Mina was the chairman of the department from 1969 to 1972, and he was transferred from St. George in Pittsburgh to Cleveland. Cleveland was a very large church, and his duties there were such that he resigned from the chairmanship, and they appointed Ray George. Metropolitan Philip did in 1972. Ray stayed the chairman from 1972 to 2000, the year 2000. It was a long reign, and he did a lot, and I'll get into that later. In early 1970s, Metropolitan Philip, wanting to preserve our Byzantine tradition as well as the Russian, but for the Byzantine, he asked Basil Kazan, the proto-psalty head chanter in New York, in Brooklyn actually, if he would write the music of the entire church year in Byzantine melodies to Western notation. This 11 volumes, if you're familiar with the project, took him many, many years to finish. I think he went from 1972 to like the early 1990s or something, late 1989 or 1990, to finish it. So it was a massive project. Basil Kazan was well trained. He was originally a priest, chose to get married, so became a layman. He had studied in Lebanon, and he had studied in Thessaloniki, Greece, so he knew his Byzantine tones. He wrote in what we call Syro-Byzantine or Antiochian traditional Byzantine. So it varies a little bit from your Greek Byzantine melodies, but it's authentic. And this project, as many of you might know, was the beginning of so many things in our musical heritage in this diocese. It enabled all the kids at camp to learn the Byzantine tones. It enabled all the cradle Orthodox as well as the many converts that came along to learn the Byzantine tones. They sang these tones all together in one version. And that, if nothing else, was the gem of this project. We could all sing together, whether we were in California or Massachusetts or Florida. And there are those who that say, you know, this tone should be sung this way or that way. But this project served a very, very good purpose at our archdiocese. And we have Basil Kazan. He was very prolific. In his later years, I used to call him up and say, Basil, would you compose a troparion for Saints Peter and Paul, which is the one we sing in the chapel here. No, I'm sorry, the one we sing in the chapel here is by Anthony Basiline. I asked him if he would compose the akathist to Saint Peter and Paul, which he did. I'd call him up and say, would you compose this or would you compose that? The unction service, you know. And he was thrilled because in his later years after he finished the Byzantine project, he didn't have anything to do. And my next project to ask him, and he unfortunately passed away, was to take the Nasser book and go through it. There's 365 days in that book, and each day has a troparion for a saint. And I was hoping he would write the 365 troparia, but we didn't get that far. One of the faithful attendees and teachers at this institute was Huri Joyce Black from St. Philip's Church in Souderton, Pennsylvania. Huri Black was here from 1986 to 2009 teaching, and she was absolutely phenomenal. She took the Byzantine project of Kazan and she organized antiphonal choirs, which she had done in her parish at St. Philip's. And these choirs were large, you know, up to 35 to 50 people. And she'd put them on the left and the right side of the church, divide them, and they'd sing back and forth like the old-time chanters that some of you may remember. There's a chanter on the left and the chanter on the right. And we talk about left choirs and right choirs. And the icon of St. Romanus that I had up here had a left and a right choir. But Joyce had a terrific talent of combining these antiphonal choirs so they sounded and responded so well. She also had a very, very great way to teach. She color-coded the pages in Matins because you have all those changeable parts. This week or that week you sing this and not that. She color-coded the pages. She put dividers in the booklets. She made it really easy for her choirs to follow all the changes on any one day. I don't think there are any antiphonal choirs of that size that are still here in the Archdiocese. We do have some. Okay, I don't know if you recognize the fellow on the left. But Father David Barr came to us and here at the Institute and has been teaching Byzantine chant. And one of Father Barr's greatest contributions is his teaching method. He just has a way to take these complicated 8 tones and somehow make them so easy to teach and have you as someone sitting there learning. It's so easy to learn the way he's done it. He's computerized all his music, so it's easy to read. And he's been very prolific, writing entire liturgies, other services, Troparia. Here's a Troparion for an ascetic. Where do you go to get a Troparion for an ascetic? So we are really thankful to Father David. And I put the 2 pictures in because I've tried to, wherever I could, show you that these composers, this is what they looked like when they started composing, and they're still composing, So I don't want you to think they were white-bearded when they first started. They weren't. And here's another one. We all know Charlie, but we don't know him with his black hair, do we? And Charlie also started very young, setting the Byzantine tones to music, and we have him to thank for many, many Byzantine compositions and his wonderful Byzantine choir in Boston that he's graciously brought here to the village and to archdiocesan conventions and taken them around the country, illustrating to everyone our Byzantine heritage here in the Antiochian Church. And he's still teaching here with us, and since 2010 he's been teaching at the SMI. Okay. Earlier yesterday, we sang some of the music of Frederick Karam. Frederick Karam was a doctor of music. He was from Ottawa, Canada. He was very prolific. He wrote not only the minor liturgy we sang yesterday, he wrote a major liturgy. He wrote much of the music for all the feast days of the year. He used virtually only Byzantine tones. Sometimes the melody was based on a Byzantine tone. He harmonized it in such a way that it was not the traditional Slavonic harmonization that we became accustomed to. It was his own harmonization. He directed not only in the church in Ottawa, but he was a conductor in Canada at the Ottawa Chorale Society. In fact, getting the photographs for this talk was, in some cases, very difficult. I had to finally call the Chorale Society in Ottawa, and they sent me this photo of Fred. Fred died at the age of 52, very young, but he left a huge body of work. What I did early in the 1990s, because there was a crying need for 4-part Byzantine music, I took Fred's music and had it computerized. And I no sooner had it all computerized than we decided to have a standard text. So I had to go back and adapt much of his work to the present text. That was 20 years worth of work. And I tried to tell our hierarchs that if you change the text, give the music department time to adapt our tons of 4-part harmony music. It cannot be done overnight like a Byzantine chant. But Fred his music is very distinctive, and it was for years only sung in Ottawa until the 1990s when we started issuing it in the department. Another Canadian composer was Ivan Voronkov. He was the choir director. Oh, before I go to Ivan, let's sing Karam's Hymn to the Theotokos from the Annunciation.
Please,
That was tone 4. Okay, now we had, in addition to these very, very prolific composers, we've had in our archdiocese many composers who are not well known, who might have only composed a few pieces or even many pieces, and they're just not well known in the archdiocese. Among them are Peter Parshell, who is not Orthodox but composed for the Orthodox Church. He has an absolutely lovely Antiochian for the Annunciation that he composed to the Byzantine tone in 4-part. We have Father Anthony Bassolin, a prolific composer of Byzantine music. He's the one that composed the Troparion of St. Peter and Paul that we sing in the chapel. We have Albert Hazim, who for many years taught here at the village. One of his lasting pieces is the second antiphon, refrain, O Son of God, who art risen from the dead. Edward Grizel, who adapted the Gretchaninov's Cherubim for us. Norman Mamie, who for many years taught here at the Institute, who was a fantastic musician. He wrote show business music for Broadway. He wrote wonderful Christmas music, and he harmonized the 8 tones. He composed St. Simeon's Prayer. His music is very, very, very well done and very professional. And of course, Father Elias Mina, who wrote in Byzantine music. And so these are many of the composers that we've had that aren't as well known, but their music is there. Peter Michaelides, I guess I didn't mention him. He wrote in Byzantine mode, and he felt that he wanted to keep the feeling of the Byzantine as close to the original Byzantine as possible. So even though he wrote in 4-part harmony, it was a totally different sound than we're accustomed to in Western harmony. We don't have time to sing his piece, but I believe it's in your books. Ah, look at this. I don't know if you recognize that fellow there. That's Father Mark over here. This is in his camping days. He came to the camp here at the village, and he took the liturgies and the music that Father Nami had put together and written down for the campers. And Father Nami just had it written scratched out on paper. So Mark took all that music and put it together and produced the first camp liturgy book. So this is what the first camp liturgy book looked like, and we have Mark to thank for that. And after that book came out, they came out with the fancy book in 1997, the red one on the left. And then the later books, the 2009 book, and there's the 2011 book. So these are the books, and over the years they've added hymns to them. They've changed, when it went from the red to the blue book, they changed the liturgy to basically what we have today in there. It was mainly in the major, in the red book, and added more pieces to it. And then we come up to the Sacred Music Institute. So in 1984, Metropolitan Philip asked Ray George and Grace Uswood and Lila Corey and Father Gregory Phelan and later Jimmy Mina to form the Sacred Music Institute, which at that time was called the Choir Directors Seminar. And we were taking advantage of the village, and so they sat down and plotted out this first choir director seminar in 1985, but it started in 1984, and that's why we're at our 30th anniversary this year. And the idea originally for the institute was, or for the seminar was, it was a place for the directors to come together and exchange ideas and music, and very quickly it grew beyond just the directors. The choir members wanted to come, and in the early years, into the early 90s, it was a great place to come and exchange music. Look what I have. I have this troparian. Well, I have this Kentuckian, you know. And we would spread out tables in the auditorium there and exchange our music. This is before the internet came along. Let me. Well, finally, we added the chanters in the early 90s, so the institute grew. Now, here's another before and after. Now, as many of you know, around 1985, the Evangelical Orthodox Church joined the Antiochian Archdiocese, and initially it was known as the Antiochian Orthodox Evangelical Mission, AEOM. They originally came to us with a body of music. They had studied Orthodoxy and learned everything about Orthodoxy from books, except music. They couldn't find books on Orthodox music. And so they did the next best thing. They took the text from Nasser, the large 5-pounder book we call it, and they metered it. They metered the entire text, every troparion and every hymn in there. And then they opened up their Protestant hymnals, and they matched the metered text to a hymn from the hymnal, because all the Protestant hymns are metered. And so there they had their music. And that's what they had when they joined us. And Metropolitan Philip, in his wisdom, did not tell them, okay, you have to tomorrow replace all that music. He said, I'll set you a goal. How about 10 years? He said, do you think you can transition in 10 years' time to the Orthodox music, Byzantine 4-part harmony, whatever? And they did. So they eventually were integrated into the Archdiocese and have contributed greatly to that. And I will jump ahead and say that we've used the metered text, and I'll tell you where later on. Okay. Well, Father Finley was very prolific, and one of the pieces that he wrote while he was still in his evangelical Orthodox days was a piece that we still sing. It came over to us. It's very prayerful and very uplifting, and it's his Holy God, Holy Mighty the Trisagion. I'm not having it sung today because we know it. I'm having another piece that he wrote, Blessed Be the Name. I want you to hear this one because it gives you a feel for the style of Father Finley, and it's a very uplifting style, I feel. Okay.
For those who know it, please sing along.
Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord. From this time forth and forevermore. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
attend your Divine Liturgy on a Sunday. Very uplifting. Father Finley is also in several liturgies using the Byzantine tones in four-part harmony and a multitude of other hymns. And we really want to thank him for all his work. We come back to Father Mark before he was father. He was asked by the Archbishop to go to the AEOM churches and take Orthodox music as they were transitioning into Orthodox music. And Father Mark put these books together for Matins, Liturgy, and Vespers that he took out to California, where many of the AEOM churches were, and introduced them to this style of music. Also at this time, Father Elias Bitar who was teaching here at the Institute for many years, had produced a set of 8 tones on cassette tapes, the latest in technology. And these were also used at the AEOM and throughout the Archdiocese to teach chanters how to chant the tones and learn them. In the early 1990s, Metropolitan Philip, in order to help the Department of Sacred Music, appointed Bishop Basil Esse, a musician in his own right, to oversee the department so that we had someone to turn to when we had questions. And Bishop Basil was a very good influence, very helpful influence on the department. And like I said, he was a very prolific writer of Byzantine music, and he produced a huge corpus of work, which is still extant out there and widely used in the Archdiocese. And this is just an example of one of his pieces. In this case, the Eson is written in the bass clef, but his music is still available and very well received, and we really have much to thank Bishop Basil for his guidance in those years. Also in the 1990s, 1993, SCOBA, the Standing Conference of Canonical Orthodox Bishops of America, decided, they had committees on missions, they had joint committees with all the jurisdictions. They really didn't have anything in the way of music. And at one point, our department was negotiating with the Greek Choir Forum to petition SCOBA to form a committee on music. Logistics of it just weren't, the timing wasn't right. But we did cooperate a lot at that point with the Greek Choir Forum. But what SCOBA did do, they decided that they needed a common translation of the liturgy. And so the OCA, the Greeks, all the canonical jurisdictions actually got together. Father Ed Hughes was the representative for the Antiochians, being the head of the Department of Liturgics. And they went round and round and trying to come up with a standard translation that all would be agreed upon. And do you use it for an all mankind? Do you use an all men and women? Do you use all humankind? This is the type of things that they were trying to decide on. And they finally decided on a common translation, which incidentally turned out to be the poetic translation of the Antiochians, but updated in terminology. It turned out it was the most poetic in what they had settled on. So the next thing was, how do we put this to music? And so the SCOBA committee decided what they would do is they would test it out. They would have it set to music and test it out in the churches, but they didn't want the choirs to learn new music. They wanted the choir focus to be on the new text. So they came to each jurisdiction and they said, could you set the text to music from your archdiocese or your jurisdiction? And for some reason, the OCA did not have anyone to do that at the time, and so they asked me if I would do the OCA version, and I did the Antiochian version, and we got Kevin Lawrence, who for many years taught here in the Greek Archdiocese, and he set the Greek version together. So these are the three versions. The one on the left is the Antiochian tradition. The one, I'm sorry, that's the translation. The one on the left is actually the OCA version, which I used Michael Hilko's Russian tones. The one in the middle, the green one, is the Antiochian tradition, and I used a variety of composers to set it to that we all knew. And the one on the right is Kevin Lawrence's Greek version. This was sent out to selected parishes in 1993-94. And it no sooner arrived at the parishes than, unfortunately, SCOBA went into a hiatus and sort of didn't disband, but it just sort of was there due to political reasons. And this liturgy never got anywhere, unfortunately. So we still have it. I have it in the archives, and it's there for historical reference. But we did get that far in less than 100 years, even if we have to backtrack a little bit. Okay. Metropolitan Philip also felt now in the early 90s that we needed more congregational participation. Early on in the 1960s, when 1966-68, when he first became Metropolitan, he asked that the choir stop singing the Lord's Prayer and the Creed. He preferred the congregation to recite them to get the congregation participation. Well, by 1993, he felt that the congregation should be singing too, to help them participate in the liturgy. So he asked Father Bitar and Elias Bitar and the Huri Laila Kori if they would put together a congregational singing book, and they asked Father Nabil Hanna to write the rubrics for the book and the illustrations. So between the three of them, they used a lot of the Kazan music, but a lot of Father Bitar's music, and they came up with the first congregational music book for use in the Archdiocese. And this, I believe, is still being used in many churches, and it's the only one we've really ever had. And so to them we owe a great deal of thanks. The reason for this also was that Kazan in his Byzantine project had written the music for the entire year, but he never wrote the liturgy. There was no need at the time. We had all this choral music, so Kazan never sat down and wrote the liturgy. So by 1993, they came out with the liturgy book. Oh, who's that?
Where's your young picture?
Yeah. I'd have to really go back, because I started in 1961. I had to go through old albums. But at this point, being a choir director for many, many years at this point, I found out that we had verses for antiphons and verses for other hymns in the liturgy. And I was directing at a Russian church, Carpathian church, and I went to look for the verses. And this book had one or two, and that book had three or four, and another one had none. And I checked all the OCA books. I went to the church outside of Russia. I went to the Greek Archdiocese. Went, of course, to our own books. Nasser has a few verses scattered here and there. There was no one book that had all the verses. I thought, well, let me check in Russia. Do they have a book with all the verses? And my sources that had connections over there couldn't find one. There was none in Greece, and I checked with Father Hughes, who is a wealth of knowledge of all these ancient texts, and we couldn't find one in Arabic either. So I set about collecting all the sources I could possibly collect and get all the verses and put them in one book. So this book has all the verses for the liturgy for the entire year, all the feast days, the antiphons, the the entrance hymns, the Prokimena, the Alleluia, and the communion hymns. I found that the communion hymn was a refrain, and we were omitting the verses. So I introduced this book in the 1990s. Initially was not published by the Archdiocese. So I found an independent publisher who published it. The Greeks did not want to publish it, and the OCA didn't publish it because it was in Antiochian English, Old English. So it was published, and little bit by little bit, the verses have crept into the liturgy, and I guess he can blame me. Within 2 years, the Greeks came out with their version, which was interesting. And there were a few differences. The antiphon for the refrain, I guess, of the antiphon, the first antiphon is the entire psalm, "Bless the Lord, O my soul." It's a pretty long refrain. Okay, and I might add, I found out that of all things for Easter, the verses for the communion hymn, the Canonicon, were in no book, absolutely no book. And I thought that very strange, the holiday of holidays, and there were no verses for the communion hymn. And I stumbled upon a PhD or a master's thesis from St. Vladimir's where a Greek student had researched it in Mount Sinai and found the verses. So when you sing those verses on Easter, you, the Antiochians, and Mount Sinai are the only places they're heard. Okay. Now, in the early 90s, we had, before the standardized liturgy came along, Ray George was really concerned that we were coming to the Institute here and we were exchanging music, and everybody had a different translation in their version of whatever it was. And he said, you know, this has to stop. He said, we have to get a standard translation. And Father Hughes said he agreed, and Father Hughes started issuing standard translations. So Ray decided the only way we could really stop this proliferation of wrong, or not wrong, but different translations, he would approve it. You know, the department would approve it. So he went out and got a rubber stamp, Antiochian Archdiocese approved. And he stamped all the music. Well, as you're chuckling, that's what happened back then. Everybody chuckled, and poor Ray couldn't live it down. And I think after a couple years, he retired the rubber stamp. And I think when he passed away, we found it in the basement of his house, and I have it in the archives here, I think. And if you don't behave, we might revise it. Oh. Well, I don't know if any of you have sung the Pre-Sanctified Liturgy as choir directors before this booklet came out. But before it came out, we used to have 6, 7 books, one for each week, or books where the chanter had to flip backwards into the book to get this, and then forward, and then backwards. It was very, very annoying and time-consuming. So I took a leaf from Isabel Hapgood, the way she set up her book way back in 1906. And I had this idea of setting the book so that you only turned forward. And I put all the services together, and Marina and Chris took up the ball, and they said they would publish it and pick the music for it. And it's probably the only book that I'm aware of that has both Byzantine and Slavonic renditions, and it's laid out very nicely. I don't know if I have a, nope. I thought I had a picture of the page in here, but I guess I don't. Okay. But it's very nice. It's nicely laid out with the Byzantine on the left and the the Slavonic on the right. And to them, we really owe a great deal of thanks. That was a great endeavor and a beautifully well laid out book. That was the last project under Ray George. That was done in 2000, the year 2000, and in 2002, Ray unexpectedly passed away. I think it was in January or February of 2002. So as vice chairman, Metropolitan, well, I wasn't vice chairman, I was just Mr. Whatever. But I sort of, I sort of held the fort together for Ray, which I had been doing the last few years of his illness. And so between January and April of that year, the department was headless. And then Metropolitan Philip decided he chose Jimmy Mina, and we'll go there. Jimmy was the director of the Opera Carolina. Jimmy is the son of our very first chairman, Father James Mina, an incredibly talented and professional musician. And when I got the call that Jimmy was the new chairman, I was absolutely thrilled because I knew we would now get a focus that we didn't have before. And it took Jimmy no time to start setting the department on a very professional course. We instituted copyright laws. We were aware that much of the music was copyrighted. You couldn't go willy-nilly go printing it. The living composers would get upset if they were collecting royalties from it. So we instituted copyright laws. Jimmy advanced composing rules, computerizing the music on Finale. We settled on the Finale software. He instituted rules and regulations so that our music would have basically the same look. We would put citations on the music, the composer, the birth and death date if the composer had passed away, and no date if he were still living, and deference to, they might not want their age to be known yet. I had briefly started the website under Ray. I'm not computer literate, but the Archdiocese had started their website, and I was putting on text like the history of the department and other things. When Jimmy came along and we started computerizing music, that's when we first started putting the music on the web as a free download. And we decided to use a free download because the music of our Archdiocese, the bulk of the Slavonic music for the century, was out of copyright, or the composers like Hilko and Karam had given the copyrights to the Archdiocese. And we decided that the best way to distribute it was to have it as a free download, because it was getting increasingly difficult for people to come to the SMI because of the expense and the time, and we weren't really reaching out to the little missions in every little parish. And if we wanted to be an outreach to Orthodox and non-Orthodox throughout the world, a free download was the way to go. And so once we started that, all of a sudden I was getting emails from New Zealand, Australia, the Irish Orthodox Church. We even had some of their priests come to the SMI for a number of years, the dean of the English Church in England. So the music started really being used throughout the English-speaking world anyway. And that was, in large measure, thanks to Jimmy's organizational abilities. The other thing Jimmy did was establish an editorial board, because at this point we were really starting to get a lot of American-born composers, cradle and convert. And this was great. We wanted to have some guidance for them, because we also had choir directors with really no musical background that were writing music, and that's okay, but we wanted good music to be out there. So the editorial board was not a board in the sense of being censors. You sent your music to the editorial board. They would look it over for two things. One, that you use the standard text, and two, that the musical structure followed all music composition rules. That's all. And if there was any discrepancy that the board felt wasn't quite right, they would send their comments back to the composer, and it was up to the composer. He could choose to either to correct it or not to correct it. If it was something really major in the correction and they chose not to correct it, we probably would not put it up on the web. But I never encountered that in all the years that the board, it was usually some little minor something, and the composers changed it, and we would put the music up on the web. So it has been a wonderful learning experience. I've had choir directors come back to me who initially were incensed that we would change their music. These are not professional musicians, you know. And then years later they came back and they said, you know, I'm a much better musician for what you told me, because look what I've done since then. This will give you an idea. In the upper right, you see the priest Vasily Staroruski. This is the priest who wrote Our Only Begotten Son that virtually everyone sings. He also wrote this in Afra. Then we tried to put that the English adaptation was by whomever, in this case Ray George, and then the dates, because we want you, the singers, to know that Staroruski was in the era of 1818 to 1871. So you get a feel of the period of when the music was written and a little bit of the background. And then at the bottom of the page, we put a copyright statement, not because we didn't want people to use this. The download is free and you can use it in your church, but we put for liturgical use only. That's only to stop a big fancy professional choir from grabbing it and putting on a concert somewhere and charging admission and making money, and hey, you can give us a teeny weeny royalty, you know. We've never had anyone ask yet for the but it's there. And then in the lower left, and this is important for all of you, in the lower left, you'll see the date. This is revision number 0. It's the original. And then the initials, in this case, Debbie Abraham, the initials of the person who computerized it. That's important because as we sung yesterday, some of Karam's work, we caught a few errors, and that's already on the web. So Chris Holloway will correct those errors, and when he does, he'll repost it on the web, and that revision 0 will become revision number 1. So if you look at that revision number, you'll see whether the version you're singing is the latest. And that's to help us keep track, to help you keep track, and so we try to put all that information. I think we're the only jurisdiction that puts all these citations on the music. There's nothing harder than when a piece of music comes across my desk. You know, Susie Smith at this choir says, here's this great litany I found, and I look at it and there's no name on it. And then it's up to me or someone to start researching, where did that come from? And sometimes I can track it down, and sometimes I can't. If I can't, we put on there unknown. So you know we don't know, and if you happen to know, you could give us a call and we'll change it. When the Byzantine project of Kazan was first started, Ray George, in his basement home in Detroit, God bless him, had an old A.B. Dick mimeograph machine. I don't know if you young ones know what a mimeograph machine is. Some of the older ones do. You had to sit there and with a stylus cut a stencil, write on it what you wanted, the music and the staff, and then you put it on this big drum with a bunch of ink in the drum, and you turned it around and you slipped a piece of paper through. I mean, it was laborious and messy. And Ray, for years, printed all the music for the Archdiocese. The yellow book and those books you see upstairs, the gold books, they're all printed on his mimeograph machine. Well, Mike Hargadis, God bless him, in 2000 started computerizing the Kazan project, which was a massive work. And he did that from 2000
to 2012 when he unexpectedly passed away. And we have him to thank for the bulk of the computerization. Now, Kazan there were some refinements that Kazan needed, and at a later date, and I'm jumping ahead, but not too far ahead. In 2002, when Chris Hallway became chairman, he started revising the Kazan to make the English accents fall on the notes more correctly, changed some of the barring, and added an ease on people. We all needed the ease on. So that is a massive job that Chris has been doing and is still doing, because there are a lot of volumes to correct. Jimmy Mina was the chairman from 2002 to 2006. His duties at the Opera House were so overwhelming, he finally had to say, I have to resign. He couldn't, he had operas scheduled during the time of the SMI, and you can't say to the Opera House, oh, I have to take off for the SMI. So he resigned, and the Metropolitan Philip wisely chose another musician, Chris Hallway, to lead the department. Chris was our chairman from 2006 until the end of last year. Under his leadership, our website has grown. I count close to 1,000 pieces on it. If you count all the liturgies and all the pieces of the liturgies and all the variations, we have close to 1,000 pieces of music on that website. We have 80 composers so far. 26 of those composers are Antiochian from the US and Canada. I mean, we can be very proud that we have 26 composers in about 100 years' time, less than 100 years' time. And it's still growing. Chris has added an incredible number of prosomia, all the special melodies that weren't written down before, and he's added 4-part harmonies that he's written. So our music repertoire is absolutely endless. No one can really complain. We have more music than any other jurisdiction will ever have at the rate we're going. So we can really thank Chris for really bringing the website up to date on that. He's refined the search engine on it. It's a work in progress, people, but it's far better than it used to be, and we have Chris to thank for that. So thank you, Chris. Okay, I'm going to rush through the rest of this since I'm over time. Father John Winfrey, while not a part of the Department of Sacred Music, wrote a funeral book. This is just text, but in it he put the text for the funeral of a priest, a bishop, and a child, and it's easy to follow. And then he wrote the Sunday Orthros book, and this is a beautifully composed book. The music is very easy to read. He self-published it, although it was approved by the Archdiocese in 2002. And then Chris Farrow, in the year 2009, came up with the same concept that I had for the pre-sanctified. I had the same concept for the Akathist, so you didn't have to flip back and forth for each week. And Chris put this book together with Robert Stadler, and it's a wonderful book for Friday night. You always turn forward. You don't have to flip backwards in it, and it's neatly laid out, and we have Chris to thank for that. This is a work in progress. Jessica Suki-Palalis wrote this service for the Lesser Sanctification of Water. She's a protopsalty in the Greek Archdiocese and taught for many years here in Byzantine music. And this service is almost ready to be published. There's just a few corrections we're waiting for her to do. And lastly, Richard Tosing, who came to us as a Lutheran convert, started composing music almost from the very beginning. And as he progressed in his Orthodox, his music just became incredibly soulful and And he wrote your bridal chamber, and I'm going to ask the choir to sing this last piece for you. This he wrote right before he passed away, 2 days. A week before he passed away of cancer in 2014, he emailed me and he said, "There's still life in these old bones." And he sent me a cherubim, an absolutely lovely cherubim. And then 2 days before he passed away, he sent me this piece. And I thought it was so moving that in the middle of the night, he beheld the bridal chamber. And this is what he wrote. Richard also took the metered text that the Evangelical Orthodox had done for from the Nasser book, and I asked him to take the December Menaion, the metered text, and write American Christmas carols, American Orthodox Christmas carols. He produced over 40 of them, and they're on our website, and they're absolutely wonderful. If you haven't looked at them, please do. They're all correct theologically. Father Ed Hughes from the Department of Liturgy checked it all out. The text is, even though it's not our standard text, it's metered, it's correct, and so now we have a whole repertoire of that. Debbie Abraham, I mentioned, was picked up from Mike Kargatis and started computerizing. She still is doing that, and unfortunately she got the virus and couldn't come this year to the SMI. We wanted her here. But she's continuing to do that. And then, hey, we got a... Now we have a new chairman since Chris resigned, and our new chairman has jumped into his task with both arms and both feet and is pushing us along. I skipped over the fact that the West Coast Institute was started in 2002 by Father Finley, which we appreciate. He got that going. And now Paul has the West Coast, the East Coast, and all the coasts to deal with. And I'll save all of that for a future history that Paul's doing, but we want to thank him for taking all the tasks. And I want to close with this quote from Father Finley. If you remember what I said about St. Raphael envisioning the music of our archdiocese as all-encompassing, Father Finley said, "The light of God that shines through him, St. Raphael, even today, can serve to further the spirit of Orthodox unity in faith and practice and musical expression on this North American continent. This is the all-embracing Orthodox tradition of the Antiochian Archdiocese of North America that we have received from our fathers, beginning with St. Raphael, and we should continue to preserve and honor that inheritance." And Metropolitan Philip said in a statement at the only SMI he came to that the music we have is truly an American Orthodox tradition that blends the old with the new. And this continues a tradition in our archdiocese that we've inherited from all our leading prelates. And I hope I've illustrated that to you today. All the leading prelates of our archdiocese have encompassed all the musical traditions. And I hope we continue with that. Thank you very much.